I don't think there's a better way to describe Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again than this image. And the people who made this show seem to agree.
It was all about getting a limb from this body and putting it on that body, taking the head and switching it to another. It was really, we Frankensteined the whole thing.
It's not an exaggeration to say that this season had one of the most troubled productions in recent television history. Midway through filming, Marvel replaced almost the entire creative team. What followed were extensive reshoots, major story changes, and a complete shift in the show's core concept. This video will be a deep dive into every phase of the production, what the initial version of the show was supposed to look like, and exactly what was changed due to the creative overhaul. This is the complete story of how Daredevil Born Again was born again. It's impossible to talk about Daredevil Born Again without bringing up the original Daredevil series, which ran for 3 seasons on Netflix and is widely regarded as one of the best superhero television shows of all time. The show was the result of a deal made between Disney and Netflix in 2013. Under this deal, ABC Studios, which is owned by Disney, would produce shows starring Marvel's street-level heroes Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, with Netflix distributing them. However, the deal wasn't made by Marvel Studios, but by higher-ups at Marvel Entertainment and Disney. Kevin Feige reportedly had different plans for these characters. The deal came to an end in 2018 when Disney decided to launch its own streaming platform and shift Marvel TV production mostly to Marvel Studios. As a result, Daredevil and the other 4 Marvel Netflix series were cancelled between October 2018 and February 2019. The cast and crew of Daredevil were not aware that the show would be cancelled while making Season 3. Thus, the show ended with a scene teasing the return of Bullseye in a future season. Fans were understandably furious about the cancellation of their beloved show.
Those shows didn't end because they were done telling story. Those shows ended because of corporate stuff.
Soon, Daredevil fans united and started the Save Daredevil campaign. The movement gathered support from many actors and crew members, and some fans even managed to buy 5 minutes of screen time on a Times Square billboard to promote the campaign. This movement almost certainly helped show Marvel Studios that fans loved the portrayals of Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk by Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio. In December 2021, 3 years after the show's cancellation, Charlie and Vincent were brought back to reprise their iconic roles in Spider-Man No Way Home and Hawkeye. Fans lost their minds seeing them back, and speculation about a Daredevil revival series was higher than ever. After seeing the return of Daredevil and Kingpin, many fans started asking the same question. Are these the same characters from the original series, or are they different versions played by the same actors? That question would remain unanswered in the following 2 years. In May 2022, Variety first reported that a new Daredevil series for Disney Plus was in the works at Marvel Studios, but unclear whether it would be a continuation of the original series or a completely new show. The show and its title, Daredevil Born Again, were officially announced at 2022's San Diego Comic-Con, with Kevin Feige hyping up the fact that it would have an 18-episode first season, rather than a 6-episode season most Marvel Disney Plus shows have. It was scheduled to premiere in spring 2024. Fans were beyond excited and thought their beloved show was finally revived. But then, every piece of new information made fans more nervous. Matt Corman and Chris Ward, best known for showrunning the spy series Covert Affairs, were brought on as head writers. These two did not work on the original series, and based on their resumes, many fans worried that they might not have the chops to handle a property as prestigious as Daredevil. Casting took place in late 2022 to early 2023. What fans had hoped to see were the actors for Foggy, Karen, Dex, and Vanessa being brought back to play these characters once again. Instead, all we got were new actors joining, who we now know make up the show's new supporting cast. To make the matter worse for Daredevil fans, Deadpool and Wolverine was casting at the same time, and it brought back most of the original 2 movies' supporting cast. That was a weird time to be a Marvel fan. One project seemed to give fans exactly what they wanted, while another seemed to do the exact opposite. In March 2023, Hollywood Reporter reported that, first, Jon Bernthal would be reprising his role as the Punisher. Second, Karen and Foggy were not expected to join this season. And third, Sandrine Holt would be playing Vanessa Fisk, taking over the role previously played by Ayelet Zorair in the original series. This made the fans very upset, as Foggy and Karen were core parts of the original series, and Ayelet's performance as Vanessa, along with her chemistry with Vincent D'Onofrio, was incredible and iconic. These new info skyrocketed fans' concerns that the new show would be a reboot rather than a continuation. As Charlie Cox later confirmed, this really was the case. Marvel Studios wanted to create their own take on Daredevil and saw stories from the original series as limitations on what they could do rather than strong foundations they could build upon. Therefore, they wanted to start fresh with these characters and avoid dealing with the continuity of the Netflix Defenders saga. Leaving out the old supporting cast was a clear effort to move away from the Netflix show's storyline. They also believed that if their version of Daredevil were a continuation of the Netflix version, it might alienate MCU viewers who hadn't watched the Defenders shows, which weren't labeled as MCU content. Marvel was basically treating the original series as non-canon to the MCU. However, because they didn't want to piss off the Netflix fans, they made their versions of these characters somewhat similar to the Netflix versions and kept these characters' past histories vague so that those fans could still think of the original series as canon. Those executives really thought they could toy with the fans. At that time, Marvel Studios chose to bring back only Charlie Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio, Jon Bernthal, and later revealed Kristen Ritter from the Netflix world, likely because they believed fans only saw those castings as irreplaceable, but not the less popular supporting characters, which wasn't true at all. For their own version of Daredevil, Marvel Studios wanted to give him an episodic procedural show that focused more on the lawyer side of Matt Murdock and less on the vigilante side. One of their goals was to make it distinct from the Netflix series, which mainly focused on the crime drama and action aspects of Daredevil. These decisions made by Marvel Studios at that time were a fundamental misunderstanding of what exactly the fans wanted. While these were perfect castings, it was the specific versions of their characters, the stories that they were part of, and all the supporting characters around them that the fans wanted to see continued, not just the return of the lead actors. Filming began on March 6, 2023 in New York City under the working title Out of the Kitchen. Michael Cuesta, the director of Dexter's pilot episode, directed the first and second episodes. Each director on the series directs 2 episodes before passing the show to another director. Starting in early May, the WGA writers' strike caused the production to be suspended multiple times before it fully halted on June 10th. To the public, this phase of production seemed to have gone relatively smoothly other than the strikes. But behind the scenes, not everyone involved was happy. Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio were 2 of them.
We were on a train that we felt we needed to stop. Basically, our plan was to just give notes. We would talk about it. We were in on each of our own notes. We would share emails and send group emails, and none of it was working.
And most famously, Jon Bernthal, who has stated many times that he would only play the character if he's done right. Bernthal was heavily involved in the writing of his first scene in the show, likely because he wasn't satisfied with it. This scene was the last thing filmed before the production halt, and Bernthal decided not to return to the series after filming it, because he thought Frank's story in the episodes they planned to film next would not serve justice to the character or the fans. By mid-2023, Marvel already had clear story ideas for Spider-Man Brand New Day, which features the Punisher in a substantial role, so losing Bernthal as the Punisher was the last thing Marvel wanted to see. Bernthal's departure, combined with concerns voiced by key people involved, served as a wake-up call for Marvel Studios higher-ups to reveal what's going on with the show. During the strikes, Marvel Studios reviewed the 6 episodes that had been filmed and were not pleased with what they saw, leading to their verdict that the show's concept of being an episodic procedural and a reboot of the original series wasn't working. To salvage it, they finally decided to turn Born Again into a continuation of the Netflix show, embracing the history and elements of the original series instead of avoiding them. Following this, Marvel fired all the writers on the show except for Jesse Wigutell. The directors for the upcoming episodes were also let go. As MCU Disney Plus shows declined in quality and viewership, Marvel decided to move to a more traditional TV model, putting a showrunner, the lead writer and executive producer, in charge of each series, rather than having a group of Marvel Studios executives run them directly. Marvel Studios chose Daredevil Born Again as the first show to implement this new model, and hired Dario Scardapane as their first showrunner. He was a writer and executive producer on both seasons of Netflix's Punisher, and is credited with writing the highest-rated episode of that show. Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead were hired as showrunning directors, likely because Marvel was impressed with their work on Loki Season 2. Philip Cervera, the stunt coordinator and second unit director for Daredevil Season 1 and 2, were hired to return in the same roles on Born Again, which was, of course, a huge win for Daredevil fans. However, because the 6 episodes that had been shot were costly to produce, Marvel wanted to keep most of that footage. So they tasked the new team with creating a new pilot episode and 2 finale episodes to sandwich those 6 episodes in between, along with reshooting some of the scenes from the original 6 to make the overall narrative make sense. Fixing the show with this strategy was a tremendously challenging task. There were only 3 episodes plus some new scenes to introduce and pay off completely new storylines, bring back all the characters, develop the new supporting cast, and elevate the overall story of the season. Whether they successfully pulled it off is up for you to decide, but I think we should reserve full judgment on the new team until we see Season 2, which was fully conceived and produced by them. Surprisingly, the directors of the original episodes 3 to 6 were actually brought back to film new materials for the show after the creative overhaul. In early 2024, Deborah Antwall, Eldon Henson, and Wilson Bethel were reported to be reprising their roles from the original series in Born Again. At long last, fans finally got what they had been asking for from the start. Filming restarted on January 22, 2024 in New York City. Iconic locations from the original show, the Nelson Murdoch and Page law firm and Josie's bar, were spotted on set, clearly signaling that the series has fully embraced its Netflix roots. In April 2024, set photos revealed that Ayelet Zorair would reprise her role as Vanessa Fisk in Born Again. Fans were very satisfied, but also curious about how the show would deal with all the scenes previously filmed with Sandrine Holt as Vanessa. The final days of filming saw the official return of Jon Bernthal as the Punisher. He agreed to return after the new team agreed to collaborate with him closely on developing Frank's story for this season. In April 2024, filming wrapped for Season 1, which now only consists of 9 episodes.
18 episodes first season. 18 episodes!
The Newton brothers, who composed the music for another Marvel revival series, X-Men 97, were brought on to score Born Again. The first 2 episodes of Born Again premiered on Disney Plus on March 4th, 2025, and the first season finished its run on April 15th. Marvel never officially revealed exactly what changes were made to the 6 initial episodes. However, based on visual clues, directing styles, and information revealed by the crew in interviews, we can form a fairly solid picture. And if you haven't seen the show yet, I strongly recommend watching it first so everything here makes sense. I will refer to all the episodes by their current episode numbers, and will refer to the footage from the initial version of the show as pre-overhaul or initial, and the footage from the new creative team as post-overhaul or reshoot. Let's get episode 5 out of the way. This episode, confirmed by the director, has 0 additional photography. However, there was ADR or re-recorded dialogue to add a mention of Matt's mother.
I never knew my mother until much later in life.
And possibly some swearing to make the tone darker. There were two major changes across the other 5 initial episodes. The first is that all of Vanessa's scenes with Sandrine Holt were reshot with Ayelet Zorair, 8 scenes in total. The scripts for some of those scenes were altered, as we'll get into later. She also appeared in the party scene in episode 6, but it's clear that only the shots featuring her were reshot. The second is the BB report, which was conceived by directors Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead and was not part of the pre-overhaul version of the show. 8 BB report scenes were added across those 5 episodes. They were filmed with real New Yorkers on the street, with most of them being unscripted. Now, let's go into each of those 5 episodes' changes outside of those two things. Episode 2 was initially the pilot. It began with Matt in the yellow Daredevil suit by the water after Foggy's off-screen death. He's crying, then pulls off his mask and drops it. And that was the initial opening scene of the show. I know he was wearing the yellow suit because the horn that Matt holds in his hands was yellow in the initial version of the show, but was digitally changed to red post-overhaul. Charlie Cox said that a cameo by Alden Henson as Foggy was planned in the pre-overhaul version of the episode to end Born Again's link to the Netflix show and to give the old fans closure, but it was never filmed. Heather's book signing scene was likely added post-overhaul, as the poster used in it was seen on set in 2024. This suggests that, in the initial version of the show, this scene in episode 7 was supposed to be the first time we see Muse unmasked, and him being a client of Heather was supposed to be a twist. Those were, I think, all the changes made to this episode. It remained mostly intact. For episode 3, I believe this scene with Matt in the court was shot post-overhaul, as it had a noticeably slower directorial style and strong religious symbolism. The scene between Matt and Heather at the end of the episode was a reshoot. This was done to give Foggy's death more impact on the story and Matt's character arc. The White Tiger death scene was entirely reshot. In both versions of the scene, he's killed by a Punisher cop, but in the pre-overhaul version, it didn't have the large symbol on the killer's clothing. The reshoot was done to make the killer's identity clearer and to introduce a new plotline, which we'll get into later. That leads us to episode 4, which had some substantial changes. Originally, the episode was meant to be a day in the life episode for Matt and Fisk, with each scene taking place right after the last, with little time passing in between. We still get a lot of that in the current episode, but likely a lot of pre-overhaul footage was deleted. Actor Harris Yulin was cast in the show and filmed his scenes, but they were all cut out. I think it makes the most sense that those scenes were from this episode. Another major change was Frank's involvement. He was not present in the initial version of this episode at all. The scene of Matt finding the Punisher bullet was a post-overhaul scene, shot on the same day as the White Tiger death scene. The Frank and Matt conversation scene was mostly shot pre-overhaul, and it was originally from episode 6, directed by David Boyd. You can tell because Matt is wearing the same tie as in episode 6, rather than the tie he wears earlier in this episode. I said it's shot mostly pre-overhaul because the director confirmed that some shots featuring only Charlie Cox were reshot. Since all the prior scenes with the Punisher bullet was reshot, I believe the new shots in this scene are those that feature the bullet. Taking into account that this scene was originally from episode 6, I think Matt's visit to Frank was originally about Muse, not White Tiger's death. It would have happened after Cherry tells Matt about Muse, which makes him want to suit up as Daredevil again. So he goes to visit Frank, and the scene probably would have played out something like this.
What do you want?
There's a serial killer out there, taking people's blood and using it to paint murals.
For Christ's sake. What's that got to do with me?
Nothing yet. Then Matt proceeds to motivate Frank to help him with the Muse situation.
All this could be a service.
Frank knows that deep down, Matt is really asking for his permission to suit up as Daredevil again.
I don't think you came here for my help. See, I think you want my permission. You want to get your hands on somebody, huh? You want to hurt him?
The purpose of this scene was always to force Matt to confront his trauma and lead him to the decision to take matters into his own hands rather than letting the system handle it. It still serves that same purpose in Matt's arc in the post-Overhaul version. After reviewing all the pre-Overhaul footage, the producers felt the scene works better as the climax to episode 4, which is about the limitations of the system pushing Matt's Daredevil side to come out. I think the Punisher Bullet plotline was entirely an addition by the new team to give Matt a reason to visit Frank in this episode, which changed the original context of the scene, and to connect the White Tiger plotline to Frank's involvement in this season. A connection likely wasn't there in the pre-Overhaul version. The ending of the episode was reshot, confirmed by Charlie Cox. The flashing red lighting is a clear sign that this was done by the new team. The character Adam was a bodyguard in the pre-Overhaul version and was played by a different actor. The new team turned him into an artist, which better explains why Vanessa would be attracted to him. This also means that some dialogue in the Vanessa scenes was definitely changed from the pre-Overhaul versions, and every scene with Adam was post-Overhaul. Episode 6 went through substantial changes as well. There were two major changes. First is that the scene with Frank was moved from this episode to episode 4, which we just talked about. The other was adding Angela to this episode. In the pre-Overhaul version, Muse's victim that Daredevil has to save was a random civilian, and Angela was not part of it at all. She was added to give the season more cohesiveness and make it feel less episodic. It also gives Matt a more personal reason to suit up, so all of her scenes are post-Overhaul. Matt's praying scene and the F it scene are also post-Overhaul as they feature Foggy's funeral card. But the suit up and the swinging scenes were not reshot, as reviewed by the director. This was actually the first time we would see Daredevil in action in the pre-Overhaul version of the show. The final fight between Matt and Muse, as well as Fisk and Adam, was redesigned and reshot by post-Overhaul stunt coordinator Phil Silvera. For episode 7, there is one Angela scene that was added. Every line that mentions Angela was clearly ADR'd.
A girl named Angela Del Toro was dropped off at Presbyterian late last night. Says she actually escaped from Muse.
She's still alive.
She lost a lot of blood. She was able to point the cops toward Muse's hideout.
But how did she escape?
The girl claims she was rescued.
As pointed out by other fans, the conversation scene between Matt and Heather at the beginning of the episode is likely a post-Overhaul scene, because it frames the new supporting cast as an unusual part of Matt's life and implies that he will eventually return to a more familiar status quo. This scene also appears to be post-Overhaul, as we can see that the suit he wears is the post-Overhaul version with a better fit. So the plot point of Matt touching Heather's face and using that to realize she will be the victim might be an addition by the new team. And that wraps up all the changes I think were made to the 6 pre-Overhaul episodes of the show. The most significant changes or additions were the Vanessa and BB report scenes, Frank's initial involvement, Angela's role in the Muse storyline, and the Adam subplot. The changes to episode 4 and 6 were substantial, while the other 4 were relatively intact. The Overhaul enhanced the parallel arcs of Matt and Fisk, added more connections to the Netflix shows, and made the series more serialized and less episodic. I was under the impression that a major goal of the Overhaul was to add more action to those 6 episodes, since a key complaint from executives was the lack of action. However, the new team did not add any new action scenes to the pre-Overhaul episodes. The new pilot episode served as a bridge between the Netflix series and the rest of Born Again, explaining why Matt is in such an unusual place in his life. The death of Foggy is something that the new team cannot erase, as it was heavily featured in the best received pre-Overhaul scene, which the executives definitely wanted to keep. They also had to find a way to explain Karen's absence in those episodes. So, the new showrunner decided the best way to handle all this was to use the opening scene to clearly show Foggy's death rather than having it take place off-screen, which would have lacked the proper emotional impact for the audience. The loss of Foggy would then be what causes Karen to drift apart from Matt. The new team was very limited by the pre-Overhaul footage and couldn't fully tell their own story this season, but they still tried to incorporate as many elements from the original series into the show as possible. Hopefully, with a cohesive vision for the next season, it will finally be the continuation of Daredevil that fans have been waiting years to see. Thank you so much for staying to the end of this video. If you're kind enough to subscribe, I'll reply to your comment on this video. See you next time.